The emergency lights cast red shadows across the cargo bay as Tom wiped grease from his hands. Another pipe had burst in the engine room, and the smell of coolant mixed with the metallic taste of recycled air. He knew the signs well enough after. 3 years working freight runs between the outer colonies. Systems were failing faster than he could patch them. "Human!" The voice cracked like breaking ice. Rix, the Saurian captain, stood in the doorway with his scales already showing the dull gray that meant cold stress. Behind him, 3 other crew. Members huddled together, their breath visible in the dropping temperature. "Your species is supposed to be clever with machines. Fix the heating before we all die." Tom looked up from the broken plasma relay he'd been examining. The part was completely fried, melted beyond any hope of repair. Without it, the ship's main heating system was dead. He'd already checked the backup units. 2 were offline, and the 3rd was struggling to heat even a single room. "Sorry, but it's gone," Tom said simply. "The relay burned out when the engine overloaded. We'll have to wait for rescue to bring replacement parts." The Chitauri engineer, Bug, clicked his mandibles in distress. His insect-like body was already slowing down as the cold affected his metabolism. "How long until rescue arrives?" "Maybe 4 days, if we're lucky," Tom replied. 6 if the weather doesn't clear up on the surface. Rix's tail lashed against the floor. 6 days? The temperature is already dropping past safe levels for my people. The Vorthari will become brittle, and Bug here will go into hibernation within hours. Tom glanced at the ship's environmental readings on his tablet. The internal temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last hour. At this rate, they'd all be dealing with serious hypothermia long before rescue arrived. The ship's insulation was meant to work with active heating, not maintain warmth on its own. "What about your people, human?" This came from Syl, one of the Vorthari. Her crystalline skin was already showing stress fractures from the cold. "How long can humans survive these temperatures?" Tom shrugged. "Depends. We're pretty adaptable." The aliens exchanged glances. Rix's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Adaptable," he repeated slowly. "Your species always claims to be special." "Not special," Tom said, returning to his examination of the broken equipment. "Just good at making do." Bug's compound eyes focused on Tom with obvious skepticism. "Making do will not save us from freezing to death. My species has precise temperature requirements. Below optimal range, our cognitive functions shut down to preserve energy." "Same for all of us," Rix added. "Saurians need external heat sources. Our homeworld is much warmer than these metal coffins you humans build." Syl nodded, her crystal formations making small chiming sounds as they moved. "Vorthari physiology becomes unstable in extreme cold. We will literally crack apart." Tom listened while continuing his work, checking systems and taking notes. The way the aliens talked, they seemed to think humans were the most fragile species on the ship. He'd heard this kind of thing before on other runs. Most galactic species viewed humans as soft and weak, too dependent on technology to survive real hardship. "You know what?" Rick said suddenly, his cold, dulled eyes brightening with an idea. "Let us make this interesting. A wager." "A wager?" Bug clicked his mandibles uncertainly. "Yes. We all know the human will be the first to succumb to the cold. Humans are fragile creatures, built for comfortable worlds with controlled climates. But let us see exactly how long the soft pink thing lasts." Tom looked up from his tablet, curious despite himself. "What kind of wager?" Rix's teeth showed in what might have been a smile. "Simple. We bet on who drops first from the cold. I say you will be unconscious from hypothermia within 12 hours. 8 hours, Bug added. Human metabolism is inefficient. They waste energy on unnecessary functions, Syl chimed in with her crystalline voice. I agree with Bug. Humans have no natural insulation, no ability to regulate body temperature properly. 6 hours at most. Tom stood up slowly, brushing off his knees. The temperature had dropped another degree while they'd been talking. His breath was starting to show in the air, and he could see the aliens growing more sluggish by the minute. "What do I get if I win?" he asked. Rix laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You will not win, human. But if by some miracle you outlast us all, you can have my personal emergency supplies. Food, water, medical kit, everything." "And the warmest section of the ship," Syl added. "The captain's quarters have the best insulation." Bug nodded agreement. "Yes, we are being generous. The soft human gets the best spot to delay the inevitable." Tom looked around at the three aliens, noting how their movements were already becoming slower and more careful as the cold affected them. They were so confident in their assessment of human weakness that they were actually offering him advantages. The irony wasn't lost on him. "All right," he said, "but I want to add something to the pot." "What?" Rix asked suspiciously. "When I win, and I will win, you all owe me a formal apology for calling humans weak. And you spread the word on the space lanes about what really happened here." The aliens looked at each other and burst into laughter. Even Bug's mandibles clicked in what Tom recognized as amusement. "Agreed," Rick said, "though you will not live to collect on that debt." Tom smiled and picked up his toolkit. "We'll see about that." As the aliens began making their preparations for what they assumed would be a long, cold wait, Tom walked toward the cargo hold. He had work to do, and not much time to do it. The temperature was dropping fast, but he wasn't worried. These aliens had made one critical mistake in their assessment of human capabilities. They'd confused adaptation with weakness, and resourcefulness with fragility. Tom had grown up on a frontier colony where the heating failed regularly, and spare parts were months away by cargo ship. He'd learned early that comfort was something you built for yourself, not something you waited for others to provide. The wager was already won. The aliens just didn't know it yet. 2 hours after the wager began, the ship felt like a tomb. Tom's breath came out in thick clouds as he worked in the cargo hold, sorting through supplies with steady hands. Around him, the metal walls had developed a thin layer of frost that sparkled under the emergency lighting. The aliens had retreated to what they considered the safest spots on the ship. Through the open doorway, Tom could see Rix and 2 other saurians pressed together in the main corridor, sharing body heat under a pile of thermal blankets. Their scales had turned completely gray now, and their movements were slow and deliberate. Bug had found the other Chitauri crew members and formed a cluster in the galley, their insect bodies locked together in a hibernation formation. Tom knew from his xenobiology training that they could survive like this for days, but they'd be essentially unconscious until the temperature rose again. Syl and the Vorthari had wrapped themselves in every piece of fabric they could find, creating cocoons around their crystalline bodies. Tom could hear the soft chiming sounds they made as thermal stress created microfractures in their skin. They were suffering but still conscious. What surprised the aliens was that Tom seemed unaffected by conditions that were shutting down their basic functions. He moved through the ship with purpose, collecting items from various storage compartments. His human standard clothing looked inadequate compared to their emergency gear, yet he showed no signs of the sluggishness that was affecting everyone else. "Human," Rix called out as Tom passed the corridor where the saurians huddled. "What are you doing?" Tom paused, carrying an armload of mineral samples from the geology lab. "Preparing," he said simply. "Preparing for what? To die more slowly?" Tom smiled. "To get comfortable." Rix's tongue flicked out weakly. "You cannot fight physics, soft one. Your body temperature is dropping just like ours. Soon your muscles will stop responding, and your brain will shut down to conserve energy." "Maybe," Tom said. "But humans have been dealing with cold for a long time. We've learned some tricks." He continued toward the cargo bay, leaving the saurians to mutter among themselves about human stubbornness. Tom had heard it all before. Most alien species couldn't understand how humans had survived on worlds with such variable climates. They assumed it made humans weaker, more dependent on artificial systems. They were wrong. In the cargo bay, Tom had been busy. He'd moved several metal containers to create a rough circle, then filled them with mineral samples, chunks of metal, and anything else that could hold heat. His portable plasma torch, meant for emergency repairs, sat in the center of the arrangement. The aliens thought humans were primitive because they still remembered things like fire and basic tools. What they didn't understand was that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. Tom activated the plasma torch and began heating the rocks and metal pieces. The torch was designed to cut through hull plating, so it made quick work of raising the temperature of his improvised heat sources. As each piece reached optimal temperature, he carefully moved it into one of several metal containers he'd lined with fabric. "Hey, human!" The voice came from Syl, who had managed to shuffle to the cargo bay entrance despite the cold affecting her crystalline joints. "What is this primitive nonsense?" Tom looked up from his work. "Heat storage," he said. "Basic thermodynamics. Heat up mass, mass holds heat, heat radiates out over time." "That is Stone Age technology," Syl protested. "We have advanced heating systems, environmental controls, atmospheric processors. Why would you resort to heated rocks like some cave-dwelling primitive?" "Because the advanced systems are broken," Tom replied patiently. "And heated rocks work." Syl watched as Tom carefully wrapped his heated stones and metal chunks in layers of fabric, creating insulated bundles that radiated warmth. He'd taken apart emergency blankets, using the reflective inner layers to create better insulation around his heat sources. "Even if that provides temporary warmth," Syl said, "it cannot last long. Those rocks will cool down in hours." Tom nodded. "That's why I made more than one batch." He gestured to several other containers where additional rocks were heating up. "Rotation system. When one set cools down, I swap in the hot ones." "But the energy cost," Syl protested. "Running that plasma torch will drain our emergency power reserves." "Already calculated that," Tom said. "The torch uses less power in short bursts than trying to heat the whole ship would take in 1 hour, and I only need to run it for a few minutes every couple hours to reheat the stones." Syl stared at him with her multifaceted crystalline eyes. "You have created a heating system from rocks and blankets." "Yep." Tom picked up one of his wrapped heat bundles and sighed contentedly as warmth spread through his chest. "Portable, efficient, and completely independent of ship systems." "This is insane," Syl muttered. But Tom noticed she hadn't moved away from the warm air radiating from his setup. "Want to try it?" Tom asked, offering her one of the smaller heat bundles. Syl hesitated, clearly torn between pride and the growing cold that was making her crystalline skin ring like wind chimes. Finally, she reached out and accepted the warm bundle. The effect was immediate. Her stress fractures stopped spreading and the chiming sounds quieted. "This is," she paused, "actually effective." "Humans are good at making things work," Tom said, arranging his heated stones in a new configuration. "We had to be. Our homeworld tried to kill us for thousands of years before we developed technology." "But this is so simple," Syl said, clutching the heat bundle closer. "Simple works. Complex systems fail." Tom gestured toward the broken heating system. "Like today." Through the cargo bay entrance, Tom could see other crew members watching their conversation. Rix was staring with obvious confusion, his gray scales reflecting the red emergency lights. Even some of the hibernating Chitauri had shifted position to observe the humans' strange behavior. Tom built up his heating station further, using metal supports to create a framework that could hold multiple layers of blankets around his heat sources. Within an hour, he'd created what looked like a primitive tent, but the interior was comfortably warm despite the ship's dropping temperature. "You have built a shelter inside a shelter," Syl observed, still holding her heat bundle. Mobile shelter, Tom corrected. I can take this apart, move it anywhere on the ship, and rebuild it in minutes. The heat sources are portable, too. As if to demonstrate, Tom began disassembling part of his setup, carefully moving the heated stones to a new location and rebuilding his tent structure around them. The entire process took less than 10 minutes, and the new location was just as warm as the old one. The aliens watched in growing amazement as Tom essentially moved his comfortable living space from one part of the cargo bay to another, taking his warmth with him, like he was carrying a piece of summer in his pocket. Impossible, Rix called out from the corridor. Humans cannot survive these temperatures better than evolved species. Tom poked his head out of his warm shelter and grinned. Want to bet? By the 6th hour, the ship's internal temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. Frost covered every surface, and the emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the ice crystals forming on the walls. Most of the alien crew had stopped moving, entirely, conserving what little energy they had left. Tom emerged from his mobile warming station looking completely comfortable. His cheeks were pink with warmth, and steam rose from his clothing as he moved through the frigid corridors. The sight of him walking casually through conditions that had incapacitated most of the crew was becoming impossible for the aliens to ignore. "This is not natural," Rix whispered from his huddle of saurian crewmates. His scales were now so gray they looked almost white, and ice crystals had formed around his nostrils. Humans should not be able to function in these temperatures. Bug hadn't spoken in over an hour. The Chitauri were locked in their hibernation cluster, their metabolism slowed to barely detectable levels. Only their compound eyes still tracked Tom's movements as he passed through the galley. Tom had been busy improving his system. What started as heated rocks and blankets had evolved into something much more sophisticated. He'd connected multiple heat sources using metal conduits, creating a network that distributed warmth more evenly. Reflective materials salvaged from emergency equipment lined his shelter walls, trapping and redirecting heat with impressive efficiency. "Human!" Syl called weakly from her crystalline cocoon. "How are you still moving normally?" Tom paused in his work, adjusting a support beam that held up his expanded shelter system. "Practice, mostly. My home colony had heating failures all the time. You learn to adapt or you die." "But the mathematics do not work," Syl insisted, her voice chiming with stress fractures. "Your species has inferior thermal regulation compared to most galactic races. You should be the first to succumb, not the last standing." Tom laughed, the sound strange in the cold silence of the ship. "You're thinking about it wrong. You assume thermal regulation means keeping a constant internal temperature. But humans are good at something else. We're good at creating our own environment." He gestured to his elaborate heating system, which now occupied most of the cargo bay. "Other species evolved perfect internal temperature control. We evolved the ability to build tools and change our surroundings. When it's cold, we don't just endure it. We make it not cold anymore." "With heated rocks," Rick said dismissively, though his voice was so weak it barely carried across the corridor. "With whatever works," Tom corrected. "Rocks, metal, plasma, torches, blankets, physics, engineering. Humans use everything." Tom's heating system had grown beyond simple heated stones. He'd created a circulation system using emergency fans to move warm air throughout his shelter. Thermal barriers made from salvaged insulation materials created zones of different temperatures, allowing him to regulate his environment precisely. Most impressively, he'd built the entire system to be modular. Any part could be disassembled and moved independently. "Observe," Tom said, beginning to take apart his heating station piece by piece. The aliens watched in fascination as he carefully removed heated stones from their insulated containers, moved his support framework, and began rebuilding the entire system in a new location. "Why are you moving it?" Syl asked. "Because I can," Tom said simply. "Mobility is an advantage. I'm not stuck in one place hoping the environment stays favorable. I can take my comfortable zone with me anywhere on the ship." Within 20 minutes, Tom had completely relocated his heating system from the cargo bay to the main corridor, directly in view of the huddled aliens. The effect was immediate. Warm air began circulating through areas that had been unbearably cold just minutes before. "Impossible." Bug clicked weakly, the first sound he'd made in hours. "You have created a mobile habitat." "Mobile sauna, actually," Tom said, fine-tuning his air circulation system. "Temperature control, humidity management, airflow regulation. All from scrap materials and basic physics." The aliens stared in growing amazement as Tom's primitive-looking setup demonstrated capabilities that rivaled the ship's original environmental systems. Hot stones provided steady heat, reflective barriers controlled radiation, insulation managed conduction, and air circulation handled convection. He'd built a complete thermal management system using materials they'd dismissed as useless. "Your species did this by accident," Rick said slowly, realization dawning in his cold, dulled eyes. "You stumbled onto advanced environmental engineering through primitive survival techniques." "Not by accident," Tom said. "By necessity. When your world has ice ages, deserts, Arctic zones, and tropical regions all on the same planet, you learn to deal with temperature variation. We've been building heating systems for 50,000 years. Tom made another adjustment to his setup, and suddenly warm air was flowing directly over the alien crew positions. The effect was dramatic. Rick's scales began showing hints of their natural color. Syl's stress fractures stopped spreading, and even some of the hibernating Chitauri began to stir. "You are sharing the heat," Syl observed with surprise. "Of course. What's the point of being comfortable if everyone else is dying?" Tom shrugged. "Besides, you'll owe me that apology faster if you're conscious enough to give it." "This is not how survival works," Rix protested weakly. "Resources should be hoarded, advantages protected. You are reducing your own survival chances to help competitors." Tom looked at him with something approaching pity. "That's where you're wrong. Human survival isn't about outlasting everyone else. It's about making sure the group survives. We've always been social creatures. We solve problems together." He made another adjustment, and more warm air flowed toward the alien positions. "Besides, my system works better with more people using it. Body heat adds to the total thermal mass. Shared resources mean shared knowledge, and group cooperation means better problem solving. You are turning individual survival into group." "Survival!" Bug clicked, his mandibles moving more freely as warmth returned to his body. "Exactly. Humans don't just adapt to harsh environments. We make harsh environments less harsh for everyone. Then we all survive together." Tom's mobile heating system had become the center of activity on the ship. What started as one human trying to stay warm had evolved into a community warming station that was keeping the entire crew alive. The aliens found themselves drawn to the warmth, both physical and social, that radiated from Tom's simple but effective solution. "The betting pool," Rick said quietly. "We assumed human weakness would be your downfall." Tom grinned, adjusting. Another heat circulation vent. "Human weakness is our strength. We're too weak to survive alone, so we got really good at making sure nobody has to." 10 hours into the crisis, something remarkable had happened aboard the failing freighter. The betting pool was completely forgotten as Tom's mobile heating system became the lifeline keeping everyone alive. What started as the aliens' wagering on human weakness had transformed into a demonstration of human strength they never expected. The ship's temperature had dropped to levels that should have been lethal for unprotected crew members. Yet in the main corridor, Tom's expanded warming station created a pocket of comfortable heat that defied the hostile environment just meters away. The contrast was stark. Step outside the heated zone, and your breath immediately became visible clouds in air cold enough to cause tissue damage. "This cannot be sustainable," Rix insisted, though he hadn't left the warm area in over 2 hours. His scales had returned to their natural green color, and he could move normally again. The energy requirements must be enormous, Tom checked his calculations on a salvaged tablet. Actually, it's incredibly efficient. The thermal mass stores energy, the insulation prevents loss, and the circulation system distributes heat evenly. I'm using about 12% of the power it would take to heat the whole ship to minimum safe levels. 12%, Bug repeated, his mandibles clicking in amazement. The Chitauri had emerged from hibernation an hour ago when warmth reached their huddled position. You are heating a significant volume of space using 1/8 the energy of standard systems. Standard systems try to heat everything uniformly, Tom explained, making small adjustments to his airflow patterns. But you don't need to heat everything. You just need to heat where people are, when they're there. Syl had moved closer to the heating system's core, her crystalline skin now clear and resonating with musical tones instead of stress fractures. You have created zones of habitability within a hostile environment. This is terraforming on a microscale. Tom smiled at that description. I like that. Micro-terraforming. Humans have been doing it since we lived in caves and built fires. But caves and fires are primitive, Rick said, though his tone was more curious than dismissive now. Are they? Tom asked. A cave is a controlled environment that modifies external conditions to support life. A fire is a chemical reaction that converts stored energy into heat and light. Put them together and you have environmental engineering. That kept humans alive through ice ages. The aliens exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand that what they'd dismissed as primitive might actually be fundamental principles of survival technology. Tom's system had evolved throughout the day. He'd added more heated stones, expanded his circulation network, and created multiple comfort zones throughout the affected area. Most impressive was how he'd made it all modular and portable. Every component could be quickly disconnected and moved, allowing him to relocate the entire operation within minutes. Watch this, Tom said, beginning another demonstration. He started, dismantling his heating station, but this time he rebuilt it in sections, creating 3 smaller warming areas instead of one large one. Each zone maintained the same temperature and comfort level, but now covered different parts of the ship. You have multiplied your habitat, Bug observed. Distributed it, Tom corrected. Same total heating capacity, but now it's flexible. We can put warming stations wherever people need to work, or sleep, or just exist. This flexibility was saving lives. When one of the Vorthari developed a crack in her crystalline matrix that required delicate repair work, Tom moved a warming station to the medical bay. When the Chitauri needed to access their hibernation nutrients in cold storage, he set up a temporary heated zone there. The mobile heating system adapted to whatever the crew needed. Your species thinks in terms of mobile solutions, Syl realized. Not fixed installations, but portable capabilities. We're nomads at heart, Tom agreed. Humans spread across an entire planet by carrying our survival technology with us. We didn't adapt to different environments. We brought our preferred environment along. The psychological effect was as important as the physical one. The aliens had started the crisis focused on individual survival, betting on who would succumb first. But Tom's approach made survival a group effort. His heating system worked better when people cooperated, sharing body heat, taking turns maintaining equipment, working together to gather materials. I do not understand, Rix admitted. Your survival strategy makes you more vulnerable, not less. By sharing resources and supporting others, you reduce your own safety margins. Tom was adding fresh heated stones to one of his warming zones, rotating out the cooler ones. That's short-term thinking. Yes, sharing resources means I use more energy, but it also means I have more people able to help solve problems. If something goes wrong with my heating system, now I have 6 pairs of hands to fix it instead of just 2. Collective survival increases individual survival probability. Bug clicked. The mathematics are complex, but the logic is sound. Plus, Tom added with a grin, it's more fun this way. Being warm and comfortable alone gets boring. Being warm and comfortable with friends is actually pleasant. The aliens were discovering this themselves. As Tom's heating system brought them back from the edge of hypothermia, they'd naturally gathered in the warm zones. Conversations had started between species that normally had little to do with each other. The Saurian captain was sharing stories with Chitauri engineers. Forthari crew members were teaching crystal song harmonies to anyone interested. "You have created a social environment within the survival environment," Syl observed. "The heating system is incidental. You have built community." Tom nodded. "Humans are social creatures. We survive better in groups, we solve problems better in groups, and we're happier in groups. Individual survival is just the first step toward group survival." "The betting pool," Rick said quietly. "We were measuring the wrong thing entirely." "What do you mean?" Tom asked. "We bet on who would succumb first to cold. We thought it was a test of individual endurance, biological superiority, species advantages." Rick's tail moved in what Tom recognized as embarrassment. "But you were never trying to survive alone." "Exactly. The question wasn't who could endure cold the longest. The question was who could make cold not matter anymore." Tom gestured to his heating system, which was now keeping the entire crew comfortable in conditions that should have been lethal. "And the answer," Bug clicked softly, "was the species that learned to change the question itself." Tom's mobile heating system hummed quietly in the background, its circulation fans moving warm air throughout the corridor. The heated stones radiated steady thermal energy, the insulation trapped it efficiently, and the modular design meant it could be adapted to any situation that arose. The aliens had bet that human weakness would be exposed first. Instead, they'd discovered that human strength came from transforming weakness into collaborative advantage. Tom hadn't just survived the cold, he'd made it irrelevant for everyone. The rescue ship arrived on schedule, but what they found defied every expectation. Instead of a crew of hypothermic survivors huddled around failing life support systems, they discovered a warm, comfortable, and surprisingly social environment. "Aboard the disabled freighter, rescue team to Dawn's Edge," came the voice over the communication system. "We are prepared for emergency medical evacuation. What is your crew status?" Tom looked up from where he was teaching Syl how to rotate heated stones for optimal thermal efficiency. Around him, the alien crew members were engaged in various activities. Some maintaining the heating system, others sharing stories, a few working on ship repairs that were now possible in the comfortable environment. "Dawn's Edge to rescue team," Tom replied. "All crew healthy and accounted for. No medical emergencies. We're actually doing pretty well down here." A pause. "Please repeat. Did you say no medical emergencies? Our scans show internal ship temperature well below safe operational levels." Ricks took the communicator from Tom. "This is Captain Ricks. Confirm all crew members are healthy and comfortable. The human crew member has created an effective heating solution." Another pause. Longer this time. "We're detecting significant thermal signatures in multiple locations throughout your ship. Are your heating systems functional?" "Negative on ship heating systems," Tom said, taking back the communicator. "But we've got portable heating stations that are working great. Fair warning, what you're about to see looks pretty primitive, but don't let appearances fool you." The rescue team docked 20 minutes later. The team leader, a professional Keth emergency responder named Dal, stepped through the airlock expecting to find barely conscious survivors. Instead, he walked into a corridor that was comfortably warm, well-lit, and filled with the sounds of relaxed conversation. "Where are your heaters?" Dal asked, looking around in confusion. Tom pointed to his heating station, which had grown into an impressive network of heated stones, insulated containers, reflective barriers, and air circulation systems. "Right there. Mobile heating unit built from salvaged materials." Dal stared at the arrangement. "Those are rocks." "Heated rocks," Tom corrected. "With thermal management, air circulation, and modular mobility. Want a demonstration? Before Dal could respond, Tom began dismantling part of his heating system. The rescue team watched in fascination as he quickly rebuilt it in a new configuration, maintaining the same temperature and comfort level, but adapting the layout to accommodate the rescue team's equipment. "This is impossible," Dal muttered. "You cannot maintain life support temperatures using Stone Age technology." "Not Stone Age," Bug corrected, his mandibles clicking with what Tom now recognized as amusement. "Advanced environmental engineering disguised as primitive materials. The human has created a heating system more efficient and flexible than our ship's original equipment." Dal's rescue team began taking readings and measurements. The numbers didn't make sense according to standard thermodynamics. Tom's system was producing more heat distribution per energy unit than should have been possible with the available materials. "How does this work?" Dal asked, examining the circulation fans that moved warm air throughout the heated zones. "Basic physics," Tom explained. "Thermal mass for energy storage, insulation for conservation, reflective barriers for radiation management, and air circulation for convection distribution. The trick is integration, making all the components work together instead of fighting each other." "But the materials," Dal insisted. "Rocks, blankets, salvaged metal, these are not precision-engineered thermal management components." Syl's crystalline laugh chimed through the corridor. "That is what we thought initially. We assumed sophisticated solutions required sophisticated materials. The human demonstrated that sophisticated principles can be applied to simple materials." Fee. Rescue team spent an hour documenting Tom's heating system. What they found was a masterclass in applied engineering that would eventually revolutionize emergency survival protocols throughout the galaxy. Tom had created a heating solution that was more effective, more efficient, and more adaptable than standard emergency systems costing thousands of times more. "The energy efficiency is remarkable," reported the rescue team's engineer. "This system uses minimal power to maintain optimal temperatures for multiple crew members across varied ship environments. Plus, it's completely modular," Tom added, demonstrating by quickly relocating one of his heating stations. "You can adapt it to any space, any situation, any number of people. And if part of it fails, the rest keeps working." What impressed the rescue team most was the social dynamic Tom's solution had created. The heating system had become a gathering point that broke down the usual species barriers. Aliens who normally kept to their own kind were working together, sharing resources and solving problems collaboratively. "You have created more than a heating system," Dal observed. "You have built a community center." "That's the point," Tom said. "Humans survive better in groups. Our technology reflects that. It brings people together instead of isolating them." The rescue team's cultural specialist, a Vorthari named Tone, had been taking notes throughout the inspection. "This represents a fundamental difference in survival philosophy," she announced. "Most species develop individual survival advantages. Humans develop group survival systems." "The betting pool," Rick said suddenly, remembering their original wager. "We bet on individual endurance, assuming the weakest would fall first." "But there was no weakest," Bug added. "The human eliminated the test entirely by changing the conditions," Tom grinned. "Human survival strategy. If you can't win the game, change the rules." The rescue team prepared to transfer the crew to their ship for the journey home, but something unexpected happened. The aliens didn't want to leave Tom's heating system behind. "Can we take it with us?" Syl asked. "The design, the principles, the actual equipment, it's just heated rocks and blankets," Tom said. "You can build one anywhere with basic materials." "Not just build one," Dal said slowly. "We want to understand the principles. This could revolutionize emergency response throughout the galaxy." Tom spent the next hour teaching the rescue team how to construct, operate, and modify his mobile heating system. The instructions were surprisingly simple. The complexity came from integration and adaptation, not from sophisticated components. This will be standard equipment on all emergency response vessels within the year, Dal predicted. Simple, effective, adaptable, everything emergency systems should be but usually aren't. The transfer to the rescue ship took longer than planned, because everyone wanted to understand Tom's heating principles. The rescue team documented every component, every connection, every operational procedure. They were particularly fascinated by the modular design that allowed the system to be reconfigured for different situations. The beauty is in the flexibility, Tom explained as they prepared to leave the Dawn's Edge. Fixed systems work great, until they don't. Modular systems adapt to whatever situation you face. As the crew prepared for departure, Rix approached Tom with something approaching ceremony. The Saurian captain's scales showed their full natural coloration now, brilliant green with gold highlights that indicated health and confidence. "Human Tom," Rix said formally, "you have won our wager completely and decisively. We owe you the promised apology and much more." "The apology can wait," Tom said. "But I am curious about one thing. You all seemed so certain that humans were the weakest species on the ship. Where did that idea come from?" Bug's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Human homeworld data indicates extreme environmental variation. Most species assume this means humans are adapted to no specific environment, therefore inferior in all environments. "We thought variability meant weakness," Syl added. "Instead, it means adaptability. Your species survived by becoming universal problem solvers," Dal observed. "Not optimized for any one condition, but capable of handling any condition that arises." Tom nodded. "Exactly. We're not the strongest, fastest, smartest, or most specialized, but we're really good at figuring out how to make things work with whatever we have available." The rescue ship's journey home became an extended lesson in human survival philosophy. Tom's heating system continued operating in the rescue ship's cargo bay, serving as a practical demonstration of the principles he described. Crew members from multiple species took turns learning to operate and modify the system. The implications extend beyond emergency survival, Tone noted in her report. Human problem-solving methodology could revolutionize engineering approaches across multiple fields. "What methodology?" Tom asked. "Start with available materials, apply fundamental principles, integrate components for maximum synergy, maintain flexibility for adaptation, and optimize for group benefit rather than individual advantage," Tone recited. "This represents a completely different engineering philosophy." Word of the heating system spread quickly through galactic communication networks. By the time they reached the nearest station, Tom had received interview requests from engineering, schools, survival equipment manufacturers, and emergency response organizations throughout known space. "I don't understand all the fuss," Tom said during one of the interviews. "I just used basic physics and common sense." "That is precisely why it is remarkable," the interviewer replied. "Your solution appears obvious in hindsight, but none of our emergency engineers conceived of it beforehand. The betting pool that started as mockery of human weakness became legendary as proof of human ingenuity. The story spread through space lanes and trading posts, carried by crews who heard it from the rescue team or the original Dawn's Edge survivors. "They gambled the human would freeze first," became the opening line of a story told in a dozen languages across the galaxy. "He turned hot stones and blankets into a mobile sauna." But the real impact wasn't the story itself. It was the change in how other species viewed human capabilities. Emergency response protocols began incorporating human-designed modular heating systems. Engineering schools added courses on adaptive problem-solving using basic materials. Even military strategists started studying human approaches to resource optimization. 6 months later, Tom received notification that his heating system design had been adopted as standard emergency equipment for all civilian vessels in 3 different galactic sectors. The notification included a formal commendation and a substantial royalty payment. Not bad for some heated rocks and blankets, Tom said, reading the message aboard his new assignment, a state-of-the-art cargo vessel with the latest environmental systems. His new alien crewmates treated him with a respect that bordered on reverence. Word of the Dawn's Edge incident had reached them long before Tom arrived. "Is it true," asked the ship's engineer, a young Chitauri named Click, "that you can create heating systems from salvaged materials?" Tom smiled. "Want me to show you how?" The lesson that started in a failing freighter continued across the galaxy, one crew at a time. Human survival wasn't about being stronger or tougher than other species. It was about being more adaptable, more creative, and more willing to work together when things got difficult. The aliens had gambled that human weakness would be exposed first under pressure. Instead, they discovered that human strength was revealed when weakness became irrelevant through ingenuity, cooperation, and the simple recognition that most problems could be solved with the right application of basic principles and available materials. In the end, Tom's mobile sauna became more than a survival tool. It became a symbol of the human approach to challenges. When the environment becomes hostile, humans don't just endure it. They change it into something better, and they make sure everyone benefits from the improvement. The bet was settled. But the real winner was everyone who learned that sometimes the most sophisticated solutions come from the most fundamental understanding of how things actually work.